way to say I don't know any of them, but I'm gonna love them all. I'm joking, Jeffrey. I'm joking. I heard your sister got mad at you today. What were you doing, huh? She's trying to do her makeup in the car, and you're like swerving around. No, you brake checked her. I like when people are sleeping. I just like start screaming, hit the brakes. Oh my God! Look out! All right, bell ringer. Describe the impact of the Japanese internment camps in the United States during World War II. Why were these camps created? Oh, there you go. We'll go over the reading right after this. Right after from our few sponsors. Commercial. No, we didn't talk about this in U.S. history. American history, not. I talked about it a bit, but I didn't go into it. Yeah. We're transitioning now away from each other a bit. Not too much, but just a bit. I'm gonna do some primary source analysis today. I have to do the Bataan Death March today, though. So you guys went over that already, American history, but now we're taking the fast route. American history now. Florida. So were you a little upset the other day when Oral Roberts beat you? Oral Roberts. What a school. Unbelievable. I should have picked them just with the name alone. They must be really good with dentistry, I guess. They must be all going to be dentists. I know. Or orthodontists. Hey. Someone have a pickup order at Walmart. You had to do that quick. I'm just kidding.
Give me a mid-grade on everything.
What?
Yeah, okay, so basically there's like little emails that you get and it has a rating. Say how your service was. So you should give me a rating.
Oh, okay. Did you package the stuff or do you just put them in the car?
I also pick the items and I package stuff.
Oh, you know what? My girlfriend does say a little bit sometimes about the sweet potatoes. She goes, "Oh, we give us small sweet potatoes." So maybe get a big, large one next time we order. What? Oh. Okay.
Yep, good rating, please.
Is this your hand up or what? It's like the water boy when he raises his hand. You ever see the water boy? Oh, that's what he does when he raises his hand. He's like, "What's going on?" The nurse. Yeah, go ahead. Fighting in Desert Storm, I get it. The dust in my eyes is like a dust bowl. Can't see. Jeffrey, take it easy on your sister in the morning. She's really upset. I'm just kidding. I'm all about good, funny jokes. Knee slappers.
I usually pretend I hit a mom when I break checker.
So she messed up her mascara then, I'm guessing.
No, she got the jewelry.
No. She said she cried a little bit. You must have been a little rough on her. That's the joke. Oh. When you get home, your dad's gonna give you an earful.
Until 5 o'clock then.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So describe the impact of the Japanese internment camps in the U.S. during World War II. Why were these camps created? What do we got here? Troy, what do you have, buddy?
They were created because of the fear of a Japanese attack inside the U.S. The U.S. created these camps so that there wouldn't be an attack.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So who created this idea anyway? What was the order called? Do you remember? It was back to last Thursday. Order, what was it? Who was the president during the time that enacted this? Troy, go ahead.
9066.
Yep, good job. 9066. All right. And who was the president that created this here? Yeah, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, president during the time, and it was really just paranoia, hysteria that maybe there would be an attack internally in the United States. That if many of these Japanese Americans weren't put into these detention centers, into these camps to make sure that they keep an eye on them. And it was a sad time in American history, dark time in American history, where there's a group of authorities, public officials, policemen, whatever it might be, rounding these people up and putting them in remote locations all throughout the United States. So there's one in Washington, the state of Washington, Montana, down into the parts of the desert areas of the United States, okay, southwest United States, to make sure that if these people would get out, it's going to be hard for them to return back to some sort of population, some sort of center, because the United States was fearful an attack might happen internally after Pearl Harbor, okay? And it was a sad, sad event, okay? And this would last to the remainder of the war. In 1944, when the United States kind of, we felt that the war was coming to a close and we're going to be on the victory side, we gave them what? What did we give these people? Do you guys remember? Jeffrey?
$25 and a ticket back to where their house was.
Yeah, take it back to their hometown where they gathered them up from, and $25. Okay, obviously that'd be around like $350 today. So we know that won't pay the bills from the lost time that they obviously were in these internment camps and these detention centers, and it was a sad time. Yeah, sad time. We didn't really repay them back. Back in 1988 or so, we signed this law giving these people compensation and showing them respect, and obviously pretty much acknowledging that what we did as a government, as a country, was not right. And obviously that does not give any type of excuse for what we did. Okay. But with the hysteria, with the paranoia, at the time, the United States thought that this was the right thing to do. All right, so many of these people obviously lost their jobs. There's a lot of mistreatment as well to these Japanese Americans throughout many different towns and cities. They weren't welcome in many entertainment centers and any areas and public facilities because they were viewed as the enemy, right? And we'll talk about some of these cartoons that were created by Warner Brothers, by Disney, to try to view the enemy, Japan, as dehumanized people. Right? They depict them as almost animalistic-like. Right? And this was a way to try to create a clear enemy out of Japan and out of these people, and forming stereotypes around, obviously, people of Asian culture. It was not right at the time whatsoever, but during warfare, that's what the United States thought was correct, and try to create and paint a clear picture of who the enemy actually was. And I don't want to show much of the videos because obviously it's really hard to watch and really insensitive. Okay, and maybe you guys can look them up on your own free time. All right, so with that being said, a lot of these Japanese Americans were mistreated during the time of World War II just because, really, who we're at war with. Many of these people were in the United States for, heck, 50, 40, 50, maybe even 100 years before World War II even happened. And it's sad that even though they're American their whole life, right, that's the only values that they know, just because they had some sort of heritage, some sort of connection to Japan, they're treated so poorly in the United States. So 1944, these camps were closed down, and not until 1988, the United States government officially apologized for what they did. All right, is there any questions on the Japanese internment camps? We're good with that. All right, let's go over this reading real quick. Kiara said she didn't like them, so we're going to go over it, make sure that she does like them. Grow an appreciation for it. There we go. There it is, right? All right, number one. Oh, here's some of the locations. That kind of shows it real quick here, where these internment camps were located all throughout the United States. Like I said, mostly remote locations all throughout the U.S. Sorry, this picture is a little pixelated. You probably can see a little bit better on your end, but yeah, that's where these internment camps were located in the United States. Remote locations, like I said, in case many of these Japanese Americans would escape. That would be a hard time finding a populated area. And keep them out in the middle of nowhere, right? Number one, what are internment camps? Why were Japanese Americans forced to live in these camps? Forney, what do you got for one? Kind of went over this already with the bell ringer.
They're forced to live here because of the fear of the attack.
Yeah, good job. So for the remainder of the war, to make sure that they would not cause any type of rebellions or violent uprisings in the U.S. Okay, fear, hysteria, paranoia. Two, what are Nize? There you go. What do you got here, Griffin, for number two?
Japanese Americans born in the United States.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, there you go. So these people, like I said, are part of the country, part of the United States, but just because of their background, because of their heritage, and their upbringing and their ancestry, these people were forced to live in these internment camps, even though they were born in the United States, even though that the only societal background that they have is from the United States. They're still forced in these internment camps. Many of these people were very patriotic for the U.S. It's just very sad how this kind of unfolded. Three, what were the conditions like at these camps? This is something we didn't get to mention with the bell ringer. Kiara, what do you got?
They were like really inhumane. They were kind of like concentration camps, but not like as harsh. They didn't like have privacy or anything.
Yeah, good job. So they're located in these large makeshift buildings, okay, obviously enclosed with barbed wire fences. And it really just seemed like they're in prison. There's no privacy. Okay, families were broken up, and a lot of these people were forced to live in these larger buildings. Like they didn't have their own separate room, private room, or anything like that. It was almost like they're living in some sort of, I don't know, some sort of camp in a way. Okay, they were given food, they were given water. Obviously, not the best of it because a lot of the food and resources were going over for soldiers to fight in the war. And like I mentioned before, it was just really sad type of living. Electricity, yeah, they had electricity, but it wasn't great because they were located out in these remote locations. Running water, same thing, out in the middle of deserts and remote locations. So they didn't have the best of running water or electricity. Uh, yeah, so very sad, poor things going on here. Sickness, disease would spread pretty quick throughout these homes and these camps. And it was just a sad time. Four, why did some people claim that internment camps were unconstitutional? What do you got here for this one, Lentz? What do you got for four?
People made the argument that the camps are unconstitutional because they're racist. There's a lot of discrimination towards the Japanese.
Yeah, so prejudice, definitely viewing these people of different ethnicity and race as an enemy to the United States. Like I mentioned before, many of these people were born in the U.S. and were very patriotic toward the country, but in these certain circumstances with warfare, with hysteria and paranoia that an attack could happen, like what we saw with Pearl Harbor, these people were forced to live in these internment camps. All right, there you go. There you have it. Moving on today, three vocab terms for today. That looks a little bit more familiar for you, Lance. Fall of the Philippines, Bataan Death March, Douglas MacArthur. There we go. So moving into the Pacific and fighting out in the Pacific. All right, so fall of Philippines. What do we got here? What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Kira, what do you have? Yeah, good job. 1942. It's not looking too hot for the United States as they're fighting out in the Pacific, okay, out in the East Asia here. As the Philippines, we know, are located right here, right below China, right next to Vietnam. Okay, we acquired these islands, right? And we acquired this military base. When? When was it? Jeffrey, you know this.
We acquired the Philippines after the Spanish-American War.
Good job, right? Early 1900s, we acquired this Philippines, established as a military base, a place where we can trade with these Asian countries, and and for mostly resources like sugar. Okay, so that being said, Japan was expanding. Pearl Harbor just happened, and the next thing that was going to happen is they're going to look to expand even more. And the United States and Japan's at war. Okay, and Japan wanted to try to remove the U.S. and their territory, their land, out into East Asia. Get rid of this military base that's located right next to them, right close to them. So with that being said, fall of Philippines happens pretty quick. And the United States really wasn't prepared for this war just yet, especially the fighting style out in these locations, okay, out in the Pacific and these tropical locations. And it was just really an uneven matchup. So fall of Philippines happens 1941, moving into 1942. Bataan Death March. What do we have? Forney?
The first move transfer of the Imperial Japanese Army. The American and Filipino prisoners of war from the Baton camps were prisoners who were on the train across the Philippines.
Yeah, good job. So these Filipino fighters that were on our side, United States POWs forced to march over 60, 70 miles to these prisoner of war camps where they were mistreated pretty badly by the Japanese, which we'll talk about and you'll read about today with primary resources. So there's people actually at the event talking about it and explaining their, I guess you could say, their perspective of the event. So it's interesting. I think you guys will enjoy it. It shouldn't take you too long to do. Bataan Death March, 60, 70 miles. These American POWs, prisoner of war, and these Filipino soldiers forced to march in these harsh conditions by the Japanese. All right, Douglas MacArthur. What do we have here? Kiara? What do you got for Douglas MacArthur? All right, yeah. So out in the Pacific, okay, out in Southeast Asia, Douglas MacArthur was really the leader of the United States, trying to push back Japan. Okay, he's a 5-star general. Okay, he's the man we're going to refer to a lot when we talk about island hopping and pushing Imperial Japan back to their own borders. So Douglas MacArthur, he's known for his shades, right, his sunglasses, and his cornstalk pipe. I like to call him the Terminator because he says, I'll be back for the Philippines after he loses it in 1942. All right, so there we have it for today with the vocab terms. Just real quick, want to go over this lesson, and I have primary resources for you to read about the Bataan Death March. All right, so with Douglas MacArthur, he was not supported real well out in the Philippines. We know that the Pacific fleet was pretty much wiped out with Pearl Harbor. So the United States, their military, not so strong at this moment, at this time. And realistically, these troops, these Filipino soldiers out in the Philippines weren't well prepared. They didn't have the resources, the armaments, the supplies to fight off this advancing Japanese military. Okay, they just really weren't prepared whatsoever. They didn't have a strong naval fleet to try to stop this invasion from happening of the Philippines. Okay, so it was really like they were sitting ducks. Like this island was just waiting to be taken over. And MacArthur kind of knew that. He figured out it was going to happen. Okay, he just didn't have the support. He didn't have the manpower. He didn't have the soldiers, the supplies, the help from the Navy like he wanted. It is what it is. It just These soldiers that were at the Philippines, the United States soldiers and the Filipino soldiers, just weren't ready for this attack or for this invasion. And this invasion happened pretty quick. Right? It happened pretty quick. So it started December 1941, pretty much right after Pearl Harbor. Right after the United States declares war on Japan, the Philippines were being invaded by the Japanese soldiers and troops. And like I mentioned, okay, Pearl Harbor was just attacked. The Pacific Fleet pretty much wiped out within 2 hours. So there really was no support to help these soldiers, these troops out that were located in the Philippines. And Macarthur had to do his best to try to hold off this invasion. Fortunately, the island falls, Japan takes it over, and it really looks like the Japanese Imperial Army is just too much for the United States, that we just don't have the ability to stop their advancement. Okay, out in the Pacific especially, when it comes to naval battle, right, we weren't prepared whatsoever. And these tropical locations, a lot of our soldiers weren't equipped for this style of fighting. They weren't ready for this new style of environment. Okay, and we'll talk about some of these traps that were set up, these booby traps that were set up for by the Japanese in a lot of these locations all throughout the Pacific. All right, so the Philippines fall in 1942, 75,000 soldiers. All right, that's a huge loss. That was one of the biggest losses ever in United States history. Okay, these men were forced as prisoners of war. Well, where they will be extracting resources for the Japanese army as their prisoners of war. They didn't have much food. They didn't have much water. They didn't have really any resources. And at the same time, the humidity was around like 100 degrees every single day. Direct sunlight. Okay, they call it sun torture. And Japanese soldiers would force these American troops to constantly stay out in the sun for long days, for all day. Okay, and there was no shade, no water, no food, no resources. And to try to travel them to these prisoner camps, okay, they would force them to march over 60, 70 miles in these hard conditions. You got to think about it. In these humid conditions, in this wet tropical climate, right, there's a lot of insects, a lot of bugs, right, mosquitoes. I know for sure I hate bugs, especially when I'm golfing. Trying to have a good time out there, and they're flying in my eyes, fly in my mouth. That one video, I was going to say, it was pretty bad. I can't say it. But anyway, with that happening, obviously there's many people that died of different types of diseases and sickness just from insects alone. Lack of food and lack of water, obviously. We know Japan was limited on resources, and they wanted to make sure that they had all the food and supplies for their troops and for their soldiers. So many of these prisoners of war, okay, they didn't get any type of resources. Can you imagine walking 60, 70 miles in this humid climate? Okay, people are obviously falling over dead because of lack of resources and a lack of water, and they're forced to walk these long distances. At the same time, these Japanese soldiers fixed with their bayonets. Okay, we know bayonets as pretty much these long, jagged knives at the end of rifles, pushing them, forcing them to continue to march. Right? Obviously, it'd be tiresome, and if you maybe stumble, fall over, maybe need a break, they would kill you right on the spot, make an example of you. And at the same time, to keep the movement going at a fast pace, okay, they would continue to jag people in the backs, in the arms, to force them to continue to move and march. And this is considered one of the worst types of mistreatment of prisoner of war during World War II, okay, especially in Pacific against the United States soldiers. Right, constantly with samurai swords. We know samurai swords, right? These Japanese soldiers that continue the march and continue the movement of these soldiers, whacking them in the arms, in the legs, okay, seeing exactly how far these troops were pushed and can walk. It was a sad, sad event. It was almost like the Japanese soldiers viewed it as a game, okay, seeing if these men could walk without limbs, walk without any type of, they would even lop off their feet or their legs, see if they could hobble and make the march to see how strong these American prisoner of war were. It was a sad, sad event. Many times to continue to march, they would even have different types of armored vehicles, trucks, jeeps, following the march, following the soldiers. And if they slowed down, the truck didn't slow whatsoever. They kept it at a steady pace that they want the soldiers to march. What do you think happened to these prisoners of war? If they fell over, or if they weren't continuing to go to the speed, they were run over. Okay, many of these people that collapsed, that fell. their heads lopped off, made an example of. And the Japanese, like I said, viewed this as a game. So over 7,000 American prisoner of war died. Okay, Filipino soldiers, same thing, 7,000. It was just a sad, sad event. Okay, and this was one of the most impactful events that would push the United States to build an extreme hatred towards the Japanese. So we had Pearl Harbor that happened. We saw the pictures. We saw some of the video of Pearl Harbor. Now the Bataan Death March, right after this event, right after Pearl Harbor. Okay, it was a clear picture that the Japanese would stop at nothing and had no remorse. They were merciless. Okay. Sometimes, some locations, to try to make the travel a little bit quicker and get these troops up to extracting resources and working for the Imperial Japan, they'd force them on these rail cars, these train cars. And there's no openings within these rail cars. They're old. Okay, they were created back in World War I. And many of these rail cars were made of dense metal. Okay, we know how metal would react, obviously, in extreme temperature, extreme heat. It's almost like it's a stove, a burning stove. And they would force many of these soldiers inside these rail cars, elbow to elbow, jam-packed. Okay, and this rail car would obviously travel at a very slow speed. And many of the soldiers died within the rail car. Here they thought that they were getting some sort of, I guess you could say, benefit for that. They don't have to walk these 60, 70 miles, but forced in a rail car with no air circulation in extreme heat, okay, and many times reaching 120, 130 degrees inside these rail car, elbow to elbow with other people, obviously, other prisoner of war. Nowhere to go to the bathroom, just let it go out in a rail car. And they'd force them to really be in this rail car for days on end. This march lasted for some troops 9 days, 10 days. And if they fell over, if they collapsed because they're tired, because of exhaustion, because of lack of food, lack of resources, they were killed on the spot. So this was a sign of extreme torture by the Japanese. And it just showed exactly how ruthless they really were. So by the summer of 1942, Japan dominated the Pacific. They really controlled a large portion, a large area all throughout the Pacific. The next target, Australia. Whose territory was that? Britain, Great Britain. Good job. Yeah. So if they claim Australia, it's not looking too hot for the United States and the Allied powers out in the Pacific, right? And we already know at this time, Germany pretty much has full control of Europe. Great Britain's on their own. They're still surviving, but there's no way that they're going to leave that island. And we're going to talk about the Eastern Front here soon. Maybe we'll watch a movie, maybe. Enemy at the Gates is a pretty good movie. We'll check it out about the Eastern Front. What's that? Did you watch it? All right, then I guess we don't have to watch it. Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. Chase already saw it. Oh, all right. So there's Bataan Death March. Very sad event in United States history. And I want to assign real quick primary resources of that event. Like I said, make sure you guys, if there's ever an event, look for primary resources, people that actually experienced the event. See what they have to say. See what their perspective on it was. And especially an event like this, it's important to read about it, know about it. All right, so I'm going to assign this right now. So go to Google Classroom. Take note, you don't have to do both of them, just one. You got that? Just one of them. Assign this now, due tomorrow. All right, so it should have just posted for you now. So there's primary resources attached. Okay, there's primary packet 1, document 3, and then document 4. Just 2 of them there. So just read one of those documents and then fill out the primary source analysis sheet that I have attached. You guys got it? You know what we're doing? So how many are you doing, Chase? How many of these are you reading? Just one. Okay, just one. All right, you pick. You pick which one you want to read. I advise you to read both and then just decide which one you want to analyze and write out. Where are you going? Oh, you're going to tell me what you're going to do? Oh, okay. All right, get going. Not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. All right, there you have it. There you have it. Just one of them. Just one.